Yeah, so it's Sir Jim. It's official. It's official now. He's taken in the club, and
Mm,
our last catch up episode, the first one that we
mm,
did, we spoke about him coming in the club and talking about um renovating the club, rebuilding the club, whatever. And now he's making moves to bring in a director of football. So it really seems that he's really taking things into consideration. And before we segue into this section, right? I just want to read
yeah.
something from his interview
All
that
right.
he did when he was officially announced and whatever. And
Yeah.
basically, the reporter asked him like, "Do you have any message to the fans?" Right? And this is what he had to say. So he says, "So the message to the fans: I think absolutely our priority with Manchester United is to perform on the pitch. So we want Manchester United to be challenging for the Premier League, challenging for the Champions League. That's what Manchester United is about. It's the greatest club in the world. So it should be playing the greatest football in the world. But it's not a light switch. We can't just switch a switch and all of a sudden United's going to be playing football at the level of Real Madrid because they haven't been for the last 11 years. That takes time and it takes a bit of patience, right? So with that message, right? Obviously, he went to say other stuff, but I just wanted to read that out loud. And I like what he has said
Me
because
too.
when he speaks like this versus when the Glazers speak, you can see that this guy's a football man. All right. You can see that he understands like
I was about to
what it
say, which
takes.
Glazers speak? When do they speak?
Exactly. When do they ever speak? Those guys know nothing about football. You can see
Bruh.
that this guy, with the little influence that he's going to have, I definitely see some positive change happening. And also,
Mm,
like what he mentioned, like this thing is not a light switch. You don't just switch on, switch off. It's going to take time, right? You're not going to all of a sudden become like Real Madrid if you haven't been playing like Real Madrid for the past 11 years. So he's really
yeah.
employed us to like practice patience. Now, with that statement that he has put out, I really hope it's going to transcend to the manager as well, because if he's saying that we need to practice patience to get to where we need to be, like I really hope those rumors of Gareth Southgate and all of this and all of that and Ten Hag may face the axe, whatever. I really hope that those are just rumors and it stays like that. Because if he's coming out and saying that it's gonna take a bit of patience, then he also has to trust that Ten Hag is the right manager to see us through this journey. And we have to be patient with him. So
Mm,
when all these things are now taking place of the reconstructing of the stadium, bringing in a director of football, Ten Hag was speaking about, working hand in hand with the football director, looking
mm,
at the type of profile of players that you want to get into the club. As you know, I watched this very interesting video. It was like shot 4 years ago, and I'll send you the link to it so you can check it out later. But they're basically interviewing Dan Ashwood, and they were talking so speaking with him, the time I think when he was at Brighton, and you're like how they approach the whole thing of managing the football club, and they were basically asking like what's the responsibilities of the football director, right? So I'm just
mm,
gonna paraphrase and summarize, but basically he said that it's about building a philosophy and building a way of how the football is going to do all sorts of things like player recruitment, training, the way the football club plays, everything like that. Basically putting a system in place, and he said that's really important because even when a manager decides to leave or a manager is sacked, because you already have that system in place of how you do things are not going to change, right? And he spoke about it's not good to chop and change managers all the time because they come in
mm,
with different philosophies, different ideals, different ways of playing football, and it ends up messing up that thing that you're trying to build. You check. So he says that putting that system in place, is beneficial to the club, the fans, everybody as a whole. Because even when I mentioned like when a manager leaves and a new one comes in, they're basically just coming in to continue what's already in place, and you don't have to now start figuring out, okay, this and that and that and that and that. Obviously, you did mention that Premier League is a crazy league. Managers don't survive for long, which is sad. Because they're not
mm,
given that time to develop into that role and into the system and whatever. But it really put that emphasis on building a system at a club, a philosophy, a way you buy players. That this club want to get it to this level, so we need to get this type of profile of player, right? That should be the what you call it, the brief. So when every manager comes in, they don't come in with their own way of thinking or whatever, whatever. Like, this is what we do.
Can change.
This is how we want to do it, you know. So if you want to bring this, flamboyant or whatever, and all these type of players, whatever, whatever, we're gonna see if that player fits into this profile of where we want this club to be and how the development is taking place. If that player doesn't fit into this module, then we're not gonna entertain it. So Ten Hag even spoke about, say, we're gonna be having conversations about, the type of player profile that we want. So obviously, we want to be looking at players and seeing if they fit into the philosophy, if they fit into the system, you know, so that they can continue the good work that they're doing. And when you see it when you see it in play, I mean, look what he did at Brighton, look what he's doing at Newcastle, albeit now he's on sabbatical because of this whole situation that's going on. When you look at Man City, how Pep brings players with that, player philosophy in mind, and they integrate so perfectly into that system. They don't just go
Mm,
out there and get random players like United. Oh, because
mm,
Casemiro's contract is ending, because Varane's contract is ending, because Ericsson is a free agent. What? And I'm not trying to say that these players that we got were not beneficial for the club. They were and they are, but at the same time, you know, we just have this habit of just getting any player anyhow. And we
mm,
don't really consider if this player is actually the right profile of player for the club. You check. So with this whole Sir Jim thing, like I really like, his statement, like I said, you know, going out there and saying, like, look, this Manchester United, we should be challenging for the Premier League, not trying to get into top four. He understands the difference. Like, this is not uh a Brighton or a West Ham or whatever, these type of teams that are coming up and are trying, and their ambitions are different to ours. Their ambitions are, we want to level up, we want to get into top six, then top four, and then whatever you get. But we are Manchester United. Our thing, our goal is not getting to top four. Our goal is competing for the Premier League, competing for the Champions League, playing the best football in the world. You see? So the fact that he came out and said that, it's like he gets it. He
mm,
understands what needs to be done. And you
mm,
can see it in the things that he's doing by saying that we're a top club. Why don't we have a top stadium? You get what I mean? We're a top club. Why don't we have top players? Etc., etc., etc. So, man, this Sir Jim thing, man, I'm really starting to he's starting to grow on me. He's starting
mm.
to grow on me. He's winning me over. Not that I
You know
didn't
what?
trust but he's definitely, speaking and doing the right, like, what he's saying, he's following through, and that's what I like,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
He's
yeah.
following through with everything.
No, with the gym, I think seasoned United fans who are going, they appreciate what's actually happening right now,
Yeah.
because I think for the club in general, there's not been a like I don't think anybody can remember when there's been this sort of positivity change, like everybody wanting change in the club, wanting to change this, wanting to change this, wanting to fix this, because the
Yep.
club is literally being driven into the ground.
Mhm.
United is what is the true definition of a sleeping giant. We've been a
Mm.
sleeping giant for a very, very long time. And so Jim has come with this energy, with this enthusiasm. He's like, listen, and I think the other good thing about it is the fact that he's a fan himself. When you're sitting from outside looking at, even me, I feel like if I was in Sir Jim's position right now, I would have been probably making the same changes that he's trying to do right now, especially with the knowledge that we have of United. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's really positive vibes, the whole stadium. I think I watched an interview where he was like, I think he likes the complex. He says it's not too bad. They renovated it. I think the Glazers,
Yeah, yeah.
after the CR7 thing, they did something,
Mm.
and they fixed that. And
Yeah.
then, but then obviously what's left is the stadium and all the other stuff. But he was like, yeah, the stadium. Either we get a new one or we renovate
Yeah.
the old one. I personally think they can renovate the old one because, but again, new stadium. Hey, different vibe. It could be a futuristic stadium. One of those things that you've got drones passing beers to people. You never know.
Yeah.
But again, with I like what you said about Dan Ashworth when you talked about the way the philosophy. United, all these things that you mentioned, that is music to our ears. In fact, we don't even know what that feels like. You know,
Mm,
everything that you mentioned, having that structure and what, we haven't had that in a while. You know, it's almost
mhm.
the only time we can recollect a moment where we were like that is during Sir Fergie. And
Yeah.
even during Fergie's time, it was a little bit different because that was then.
Mm,
Football has changed now. You know, it has moved into a different era. So things are a little bit different. So, you know, what you said was spot on, bruh. Because you look at, and then again, this guy that they're trying to bring in, I think they need to bring him in fast because I think right now they are busy. I don't know if it is because of his price tag or whatever, but I think the word that I heard was like 20 million to buy him out of wherever he is. And
yeah.
I was like, that is change. That is pocket change, especially when you consider the billions that we wasted
Yep.
in useless, stupid fucking signings. Like
Yep.
signings with no direction, bro. You know? And now we're at this point where we need somebody that can fix that. I say, I'm actually surprised he's not yet in the club right now because we need to fix it. Like, even if he 40 million, give him. Give
Yeah.
him because for the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, this guy is
Mhm.
going to fix the books for you guys because he's
Yep.
not going to waste money on useless players. He's
Mhm.
not going to overspend on
Yep.
players. We're not going to get rid of players that should actually be in the club. We're going to get rid of
Yep.
players that we need to actually get rid of, you know.
Yeah.
So there's going to be and then also this thing of these contracts that we are giving these youngsters.
Yep.
I think Ineos is going to try and fix it to try and cap it because man, I'm
Yeah.
still a little bit I don't say upset, but I'm annoyed that Rashford has got a lot of money. I really, really am upset by that because that money translates into the responsibility that you're given. Do you understand? If
Yeah.
you're the
Yeah.
highest paid player, the
Mm,
responsibility on you is higher. You are supposed to
mm,
perform week in, week out. And if you don't do
mhm.
that, then your price tag or your salary thing it makes no sense and it starts making
Mm.
us upset. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because we're like, why are
Yeah.
you paying him this if he's not going to go and put in a shift?
Exactly.
So that thing, if Ineos can fix that, like cap the salary.
Yeah.
Like you come
Yeah.
to look at Bayern Munich. I think Sadio Mane and Harry Kane were the players that were I think highest paid. Sadio
Yeah.
Mane, they didn't even like it. Those guys
Yeah.
are like, why is this black guy getting all this money here?
Mm, mm.
300, I think he was getting 300 something, while their salary cap is about 200 or something. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
People like Kimi, Muller, Neuer, their salaries are between 200 and below. Here we're
Musiala.
giving, bruh, you like, get this Dan Ashworth, bring him in, or Paul Mitchell. I don't know.
Yeah.
I needed to ask you, who do you prefer, Paul Mitchell or Dan Ashworth?
You
Based
know
on
what?
the rumors that you've heard. Just a quick one. Would you like Paul
All right.
Mitchell or Dan Ashworth? Based on the little or the
The lit
information
the
that you've consumed on them.
Yeah, I think the little information I've consumed was probably Dan Ashworth, sorry, Dan Ashworth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
like his
So
I
Paul
like the job
Mitchell,
he did.
I don't know much about his history and what he has done. You know, he could also be as capable as Dan Ashworth, but I guess
Yeah,
Dan Ashworth is just the one I've recently versed myself on a lot, and I've liked what
true.
he has done. You know, at Brighton, at Newcastle, and you know, it makes sense because remember the times when Brighton were coming up and were doing well, and you just didn't understand why. You know, and then Newcastle also just had a recent resurgence, and then when you put a name and a head and a figure to it and stats and information, you're like, I see now. You know what I mean? I want some of that. You know, if you could get Brighton and Newcastle up to these levels, you know, what imagine now if you had the disposable money of Manchester United, what you could do, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's exciting. It's exciting to see and I just really hope that it can come through.
And again, what you mentioned, you know, when you said that what Dan Ashworth said about having this strategy and this plan and philosophy,
Yeah.
Brighton are the perfect example of it
Yep.
because Graham Potter was there for a
Mm.
while, did his thing. We saw the football improve. Like as
Yeah.
they came in, they were not the
Yeah.
Brighton that we see now. It improved, and
Exactly.
then you know I thought like after he leaves going to Chelsea, maybe it is going to dip. No, it didn't
Yeah.
dip. Zerbi walked in, he just brought his
Mm.
different energy, but then the
Yeah.
football was still the same. And that is
Yep.
something that, yeah, like
And when you
when you were
and when
saying it,
you
it was like,
Yeah, and when you look at the players that they've bought, again,
yeah,
it's just because they lose like Cucurella and then they've got a Stupian. You know what I mean? Like, where are you finding these players? You get what I'm trying to say? They just
yeah,
fit into like the system, and it's like Cucurella never left because now they have another player in that position to do what you call this, what the one before was doing. You check. I mean, they lost a lot of players, and we thought that yeah, these guys are gonna be lost. You get what I mean? They lost Trossard, they lost Cucurella, they lost Caicedo. They lost who else did they lose? They lost quite a lot of players. But then they easily just went and brought these same profile players back into the squad, and they didn't dip as hard as we thought that they would because of that system and that structure and that philosophy, and you know what I
yeah,
mean? That's in place. So the ship just keeps moving. It keeps moving, you know?